Of course, your biggest TV project currently is Deal or No Deal. No sign of you ever leaving that. You seem to love it as much today as you did on your first show.
Well, Alex, that's a really interesting point, and it allows me to say that at this moment in time, I have no idea about its future. Oh. And I don't know if Channel 4 are going to continue with it. We've recorded enough shows to get us to, I think, about March of next year. But as of now, they haven't indicated whether they want any more. It's their call, and I'm very relaxed about it. I had great 10 years, and if they want any more, they've got my phone number.
And you'd love to do it if they want you?
Yeah, I love doing it. You know, it's an absolutely fantastic show to do because actually, you know, it's me. I just wander in and chat to people and change their lives forever. It's kind of a bit of a buzz.
Welcome back to Celebrity Radio. It's Alex Belfield talking to some of my favourite people and some of the country's biggest stars. And we've got one for you today. He's a man who's positively happy. He's an award-winning DJ, an author and TV presenter from Radio 1 to multicoloured swap shop top of the pops. He's the man who everybody knows as Noel. How are you?
I'm very good, Alex. Thank you.
That must be the bit when you know you've made it, when you only need one bit of your name for people to recognise you.
Well, it used to be that way, but then Noel Gallagher came along and started having fights with people and getting into trouble. And I used to dread opening tabloid newspapers because it would sort of have a headline, Noel in drugs bust. And I would think, no, I've never taken drugs. How's that happened? But there aren't too many Noels around. You're right.
It's great when you get to that category, when you are a legend. You can't comment on that because you're going to deny it, but you are. I mean, you've had such a wonderful career and, of course, long-lasting. And that's what's amazing, isn't it? In this career, you can come, but you can easily go. You've managed to stay, and I think it's probably because of the formats in which you've worked. When I look down the list, they're all good shows, aren't they?
I've been very fortunate. I've worked with very good people. That's the key thing. I've had good producers, good directors, very good teams, and, strong formats. It's been fortunate, but there's been a certain bit of planning involved. But I'm not the brightest on the planet. I mean, anyone who turns down Deal or No Deal 3 times has got to be a bit suspect. But we've now done 10 years, which is a lot longer in some territories around the globe, and we're coming up to 3,000 shows. And we'll have our 10th anniversary in October. So, I've been very, very fortunate to be given some very interesting challenges.
All of your formats seem to involve the public, and you seem to be the best at handling them. Were you always a people person and you always cared?
Real people. I'm not a celebrity sort of person. I don't go to the opening nights. I don't do all the celebrity parties and things. I've always regarded broadcasting as a job, and I've tried to do it to the very best of my ability, and I've always enjoyed working with what I call real people. I mean, the majority of the population on planet Earth, real people, and if you can bring television into their lives or radio and make that day a little bit special, then so much the better, and that's just the area I love operating in.
We've got a million things to talk about today. The most important thing we're going to talk about is how to be positive and positively happy. I wonder what positivity you get from shooting a 13-year-old lion and paying £35,000 for the privilege. Some people's fun and positivity's got in different ways, isn't it?
Yeah, I regard that as a massive negative, and I think the individual concerned has to look at his negative energy system. I have a book coming out next year called The Positivity Formula, and I've spent 5 years looking at the science behind being positive, as distinct from being happy. You know, that individual you've mentioned is probably very happy destroying life. But, you know, don't forget, in the UK every single week, 3 children are killed by their parents or carers.
Right.
So let's have a sense of priority here. People that do these things have an imbalance in their energy system.
Right.
Many other people on August the 12th are very happy shooting grouse on Scottish moors. Some people snort cocaine and it makes them happy. Happiness is a very personal thing and very difficult to define. Positivity is actually scientifically proven. You can define the science of positive energy. And I found the subject very, very interesting, and I have found 6 elements which anyone can adopt in day-to-day life, and you will be more positive, you will be healthier, and therefore you will be happier, and you will almost certainly live a longer life. And you'll notice the order there, Alex. You know, a lot of the mind, body, and spirit brigade think you can think your way to being positive. You can't. It's important. It's an important element. What you are thinking is an important element. But if you are physically in a negative energy situation, you cannot possibly be healthy.
It's interesting. When we did the last interview about your book, it seems to me that stealing £1 million off a little old lady, the money will make you happy, but it's whether you can deal with your conscience. That's it, isn't it? Consequences and long-term energy opposed to the short-term gain.
I like your use of language, Alex, and you're underlining one of the biggest challenges that we have. We need words, because otherwise we can't communicate. But so often we saddle ourselves with words like conscience, like spirit, like angels, death being one, and there isn't such a thing as death. It's just departure, but that's another word. You know, what this is about is positive energy, and I find the subject absolutely fascinating, and every single human being can achieve a perfect vibrational balance between their positive and negative energy. I believe it is possible to retune people, and I believe that there is an energy which we know is there, we can't measure it, and therefore because it's invisible we deny its existence. But if you want to be happy in this world, if you want to be healthy, you have to think of yourself as a container of energy. And people that do these extreme things, do unpleasant things in the name of a religion or whatever, they have an imbalance between their positive and negative energy.
So you mentioned earlier that there's no such thing as death. So do we just go through one door into another part of another world? Is that how you see it? How can you put that into words?
Lovely. You see, Alex, you're lumbered again, and I know why, because I used to be. You're talking about doors and things. There is a universal energy.
Right.
It's been known for a very long time. Einstein alluded to what he called the invisible piper. Other people would call that God. Is there an energy system that is the universe? Yes, of course. And it embraces what some people call Gaia, planet Earth, and it embraces us. You and I are in contact now, even though I am on a mobile phone and you are in the UK and I'm not in the UK. You know, we are linked by this energy web. Some call it a matrix. Everything is actually linked. And when you understand that and appreciate it, boy, oh boy, life becomes a lot more exciting, because you don't actually live life. Life lives you. And you cannot die. Yes, the energy leaves your container. It is a scientific fact at the point of what we call death. The body weighs less than during what we call life. So where has that energy gone? You cannot destroy energy. You can only change its form. It has to go somewhere.
But you do accept there are some people who actually believe that we are just here for the period in which we breathe, and once we stop breathing, we're gone, and that's it forever. The only thing that lives on is legacy.
I totally respect people's religious views. I respect atheists. I respect everybody. Do you know, tolerance and respect are in very short supply, which is why the world is gradually going down to a very dark place, it would appear.
Yeah.
I have enormous respect for other people's opinions. It doesn't mean I agree with them, and I live my life according to the knowledge that I've acquired. And I tell you, I feel a lot better knowing that actually it doesn't all end when Noel Edmonds ceases to live by the medical definition. My energy will just simply return to where it came from, part of a massive, incomprehensible, universal web of energy.
Did you always know all this stuff? I mean, even when you were back at Radio 1?
Do you know, Alex, you said we met 10 years ago, and you very, very kindly interviewed me for a book, Positively Happy.
Yeah.
And my new book next year, The Positivity Formula, the opening chapter, I refer back to Positively Happy and say, in 2005, I believed you could alter your life and improve your life by a process of mental discipline. In the new book, I admit I was wrong, because when people came up to me and said, "Oh, your book changed the way I felt. I was at a low spot, etc., etc. How does it work? How does it work?" I felt really embarrassed because I couldn't answer the question how it worked. So that's why I went on this odyssey, this sort of health detective trip, to try and find out what the science is. And the science is actually very straightforward. You know, it comes out of quantum physics. We should all sue Isaac Newton, because he has indoctrinated us, bless him, with the view that if you can't measure something, it doesn't exist, which we now know to be total rubbish. And there is an energy which so far, admittedly, hasn't been measured, not even by the people in CERN, with the Large Hadron Collider, but they acknowledge it exists, and it moves at incomprehensible speed, and it is actually, the whole thing is beyond our comprehension. And when people say to me, "Oh, it's all very well, what do you mean it's beyond our comprehension?" I have a beautiful dog called Mr. Chips. He's a Labrador. There's no way Mr. Chips could ever send a text message on a mobile phone.
Right.
Now, that is my parallel. What is the world, life, what it's all about? Actually, we are ill-equipped to understand, but we must appreciate the existence of this energy.
I wonder whether I'm intelligent enough to comprehend all this, because when I hear you say it, it makes absolute sense. But then I'll speak to somebody else who'll give the opposite opinion. I go, well, that also makes sense. How do you know you're right?
Because we live in a world where we're suspicious of the invisible.
Right.
You can say to somebody, look, quite obviously, we are all linked by energy. How come we have telepathy? How come you can walk into a room and not like the room? What is it about that room? And I'm not talking about the decor. How is it that you meet a group of people, some people you immediately are attracted to, some people you think, oh, I don't know. Well, what's going on with that? What's going on with the sudden thing that you're thinking about something and the phone rings and it's the very person? How is all that going on? There is something invisible going on, but we don't question how it is that you and I are able to talk on a couple of mobile phones.
Right.
We live in a world where we want proof. But if you open your mind to it, how come some people have got green fingers? They can touch a plant and the plant will revive. Other people touch plants and kill them off. It's because plants are energy as well. We are all energy. And believe me, the man that shot the lion, and this is not a threat, this is science, will have karma. Something is going to happen to that guy, because what he did was so utterly negative. The energy he poured out, negative energy, will leave a big gap in his energy field, and negative energy will pour into him. We talk about karma. How is it that good things happen to good people? Because they have positive energy. You put out positive energy there, you will attract good things, because the vacuum that you've created by pushing it out has to be filled by more positive energy. It's just basic science.
We're talking today to Noel Edmonds. His website is positivelyhappy.com. You can hear, coming soon, about 400 radio stations. There's 3 up there at the moment. There's one about Bristol, one about being happy. And you got a royal one as well, which is really interesting. We're going to get to all that in a bit. For people listening to this who are in a really miserable job and are incredibly unhappy and have an arsehole of a boss, what do they do about it? How can they turn that around and make that positive?
You have to start with the very basic phrase, positivity is a state of body, not a state of mind. If you are in that situation, you must examine the way you look after your body. And when all is said and done, you have to be responsible. I used the word earlier about respect, responsibility, etc. Why is it we've now got a world where everything is someone else's fault? But you've only got one body. Alex, you've only got one container of energy. Yeah. And therefore saying that, I'll go to the doctor, or the NHS is failing, or governments should introduce this, or, that was terrible and whatever, it's completely missing the point. You're responsible for your self-help and for your wellness. And somebody who is in that ghastly situation you've described has to go back to basics, because the moment they get their own energy balance right, food, with the right exercise, with probably electromagnetism balancing their body energy system. That's a very well-proven method of science. Once they're in that position, they will find everything else in life changes. But you won't get to a positive situation by picking an argument with a negative boss in a negative work environment.
Right. It seems like what you're saying, there's a good argument for the NHS to get rid of tablets at pharmacists and bring in this electrolysis or whatever you call it. Tell us a bit more about that. I'm not familiar with it.
Well, electrolysis is a way of getting rid of unwanted hair, so it's not about
right.
everything. Everything's about energy.
Yes.
The entire universe, I've said it. There's an energy web. Imagine this most wonderful diaphanous sort of silky fabric of energy moving at incredible speed. That's all you are.
I like diaphanous, by the way. Good word.
You weren't expecting that.
No, I didn't think I'd hear that one today.
No, well, I was on a bet to try and get it into the conversation, so I just want a beer. Why are we going to have a problem within the next 20 years, a health problem that is almost beyond imagination? Because we're surrounded by electro mist, electro fog, and electro smog. We are covering ourselves in the wrong sorts of electromagnetism. And these idiot politicians who talk about climate change, I mean, for goodness sake, even if the climate is changing, do they really think that little us can do anything about it? No, of course not. The biggest problem we have is not Ebola, it's not AIDS, it's actually electrosmog, the Wi-Fi, and all of the systems that we are introducing into our lives are destroying our own natural electromagnetic fields. All you are is energy. Remember that, Alex. And energy is electric and electromagnetism. And there is a device called an Emppad, and I use it 8 minutes a day, and it has changed my life because it recalibrates all of your blood cells and readjusts the electromagnetism in your body.
What is it? You go into a room or you put pads on you? How does it work?
No, it's think of a yoga mat. It looks like a yoga mat. It's connected to a very small tablet computer, just like an iPad, and it provides you with pulsed electromagnetism. It's a technology that has been known for, well, thousands of years, but in recent times developed by the Russian space program and by NASA. It's a brilliant technology that very few people know about. It's not cheap, but it's affordable. An Emppad costs about £2,000. And I see people riding bicycles these days that cost £3,000.
Yeah.
And I see people buying large screen televisions for £2,500, £3,000. It depends what you want to do with your life. It has changed my life. It removes pain, reduces stress, and people tell me I don't look 66.
No, you don't. And I see that all over the papers. Do you think there's an argument then to bring this in as some form of treatment for people who rely on the NHS so desperately for tablets and therapy and treatment? Could this help? Do you genuinely think this could be the future?
Yeah, I think my positivity formula, of which pulse electromagnetism is an important part, it's 6 things that you do. It's a fabulous way of staying out of the NHS. It's a really great way of maintaining your health and well-being.
You mentioned earlier that you're delicious, and of course you are, Noel. The ladies just think you're fabulous. Is that, again, about positivity, or is it about some form of lotion and potion that you're slapping on your mush?
Next question, please. I love it. Only you could get away with that.
No, well, it's an interesting question because I'm a deeply unattractive man, you see, Noel. I don't have your blessings.
Well, what you got to do is back to the positive energy. If you exude positive energy, it's amazing how attractive both sexes find you, and passing dogs. It's amazing. Positive energy attracts attractive people.
No, I wouldn't want to be rejected by both sexes. One's quite enough, to be honest with you, Noel. It's interesting. The most negative point in my life over the last 15 years was, funnily enough, at the BBC. It's been an interesting time for them of late. Do you think they did the right thing with the Top Gear in the end, or was it just one big cock-up from beginning to end, getting rid of him and having him back before he left the building?
I think it was just yet another example of extraordinarily bad management that wouldn't be tolerated in a private company. I'm thinking Russell Brand and Jonathan Ross, and then we've got what happened with Clarkson. I mean, it is difficult to think of a better way of handling something badly. It was just extraordinary.
Yeah.
You've got all the bigwigs saying, no one person is bigger than the BBC. And then they pull the show, denying the viewers the chance to see whatever they'd shot. Then they cobbled it together into a final episode that didn't really work because it didn't have all the lovely little elements that people love. The good news for Top Gear fans, of which I am one, is that apparently we're going to get Chris and we're going to get a great Top Gear, and the other three will emerge somewhere, hopefully doing something not purely about cars, because I think they would be brilliant if their brief was expanded. So we'll sort of get two shows in the place of one. But as a management exercise, it was right up there with running a cruise liner onto a heap of rocks.
You made some very public statements a year ago, which have proved to be, well, profound, actually. If you look at what's happened in the last month, it's been probably the worst 6 weeks in BBC history, and I don't think they quite realise how close to the bone they are. It is getting depressingly worrying for those 7,000 managers at the top who are no longer going to be funded.
Yeah, the problem... I mean, I love the BBC, and I don't want to see it collapse and fail. But it is difficult to see with its current strategy how that can be avoided. It only requires 6% of licence payers to stop paying, and the whole lot collapses. You know, this is an organisation with a guaranteed, £4.5 billion income. Well, a lot of private companies would like to have a guaranteed income of that. They spend £120 million collecting the licence fee.
Yes.
So, you know, I mean, it's just absolutely insane. There's nearly 1 million licence payers who pay just simply to collect the licence. They don't get anything for it. And you have to ask the question whether the second letter in the title BBC is actually achievable. Because there is a very strong argument that broadcasting is on its way out, that you can no longer spray and pray, that niche casting, genre casting, is the way forward, because the consumer is now in charge. You know, forget people living in Notting Hill and wandering into the BBC on very nice salaries. You know, they're not in charge. The consumer's in charge, and hooray for that.
Yeah, 770 BBC people have taken redundancy and are now working for the corporation again full-time, which cost us $33 million. That level of corruption has to stop. This is public money, and we haven't got it to waste, have we?
Yeah, be careful with the word corruption. I don't believe the BBC is a corrupt organisation for one moment. I think there are elements of it that are truly incompetent.
And you mentioned Chris Evans. It's interesting as well with him. I mean, he's the first biggest star to do as many jobs as you did when you were there. Do you see the parallels between you and him? Do you think he's as good as you were?
Well, I can't answer that last part of that question. You know, I'm confident but not arrogant. It's interesting. I sat at the Monaco Grand Prix. I was a guest on Chris's boat briefly to do a Q&A with these with the people that paid a huge amount of money to children in need to go for the weekend. I mean, Chris has raised huge amounts of money doing that. And after the Q&A, he and I sat and had a little chat. And we talked about Top Gear and whatever. And Chris said, no, I wouldn't touch it with a barge pole. And he said how tired he was. And he did look very tired. And so I was absolutely stunned when, within weeks, I read, you know, that he'd not only shown interest, that he'd accepted the job. I just hope he's not taking on too much. He is a brilliant talent. He is also mercurial talent in the true Kenny Everett, Clarkson mould. And he will need to be managed and supported. Otherwise, he could just burn out and make some shocking mistakes. I hope it works out for him. I'm a big fan of his.
I was excited to read that Moyles might be coming back to breakfast radio. He's another one in your league, in Evans's league, who's sort of become a megastar of breakfast radio. Do you think that could reinvent FM broadcasting, or is it too late? It all seems to be going online. That seems to be the way the BBC agree with iPlayer, that's the future, not terrestrial broadcasting.
I cannot see how traditional broadcasting can survive in any sort of influential way. All of the commercial stations in the UK are struggling. They are finding it very, very difficult to get their ad revenues. Newspapers are finding it difficult with ad revenues. People like DM and GT, the Daily Mail and Mail Online and whatever, they've reinvented themselves online. It's very difficult to see how an FM station, any of our local radio stations, can reinvent themselves. The consumer doesn't want it. The consumer does not want to tolerate for a second stuff that they're not interested in. And too much of radio isn't relevant to them.
Is BBC local radio worth £112 million a year?
No, it isn't. Of course it isn't. And the Gaelic services aren't worth it either. If you want to have Gaelic broadcasting, you can get that online and you can get it done better. It's insane that they spend something like 40, 50 million pounds a year entertaining tens of thousands of people. Yeah. It's insane that they fund the BBC World Service. You know, do people living in the UK really want to be funding government propaganda? The whole structure of it, so you've gone back to the Beeb again, but the whole structure of it is wrong, which is why last year I revealed that I had a consortium lined up and we are ready to buy the BBC. It requires an Act of Parliament, but we would buy the BBC and save the BBC.
It's interesting, when you came out with that, people laughed at it and thought it was a joke. But it seems like, again, in recent weeks, it is not unthinkable that it could happen, because the BBC as we know it is not going to be around in 5 years. They're going to certainly cut the budget to a point where there can't be these thousands of journalists up and down the country. And there's a good argument that there shouldn't be that many. What would you do then? What would your BBC look like, and how many people would it employ?
Well, just on the first part of that, I was interviewed on Newsnight, and Jeremy Paxman sneered at me when I said I had this consortium and we would buy the BBC. Within weeks, he had left Newsnight, and within weeks, he had attacked the BBC publicly in a number of articles. You know, there's a lot of two-faced people, and I'm not being two-faced about it. I had 30 great years at the BBC. I've made my position clear. I would hate to see the UK lose the BBC, but it has to be pared down and fit for purpose. It's trying to be all things to all people in an age when Apple could crush it tomorrow.
So what would you do then? Back to my original question.
You have to pare it down. You have to accept the fact that the consumer is king, and therefore people can get their local news and information from other sources. You don't need that massive news operation. Gone are the days where the BBC led the world in impartial news. It's struggling to defend itself as being impartial, and clearly from the recent election coverage, it's not impartial. Yeah. So when in the world of CNN and Al Jazeera, big global broadcasters, and obviously the power of the internet, you know, BBC News no longer carries the respect it used to. So you've got to cut down the whole of the news side of it. You've got to focus on probably a couple of good TV channels, and you've got to really focus upon original programming. People want good content. They don't want repeats of shows. They don't want padding things out. And you think ITV threw themselves into a multi-channel environment and immediately lost millions, and because they're private, had to close them all down.
Yeah.
Well, the BBC staggers on with channels that at times only hundreds of people patronise.
And there's a good argument that Radio 1 and 2 should be closed, as we heard last week, but they're hugely popular. Would you defend those, or have they got to go too?
Probably you need two very good radio channels, and how you configure them, I don't particularly want to reveal, but do you remember there used to be two? One was called the Light Programme, and one was called the Home Service.
Yeah.
Radio 3, forget it. You know, it's too elitist, and it's too irrelevant. Classic FM do a good job, and now I've launched Positively Royal. We play excellent classical music. So, no, that's got to go. I think a BBC where it focuses upon what it used to do best, which was encouraging talent and producing original content on a small number of channels, and clearly an internet presence. They've got to, they can't walk away from the internet, and it's got to be funded in a slightly different way. But it's all going to, it's all going to fall apart if it just staggers on the way it is.
And finally on the BBC, getting turkeys to vote for Christmas, how do we get rid of managers to get rid of managers?
Yeah, that's a problem, isn't it? That's always been a problem. But when I own it with my really good team, it won't be a problem, Alex.
You can sort that out. And very finally, aside from the BBC, although it's related, I did the last interview with Jimmy Savile. At this point, when you look back, is it astonishing, again, A, how the BBC handled it, and the B, that it was kept so quiet for so long?
I don't know. It's a really good question. And there's an assumption that because I was at Radio 1 when Savile was there, and I also hosted Top of the Pops, and I was on BBC television and whatever, that I would know anything about that. And it sort of almost seems a bit naive to say, but I didn't know about it. I mean, I read an interview recently with Anne Nightingale, and Anne was asked that question. She said, you know what, I used to go to the BBC, do my job, and go home. And that's what I've always said. You know, it was an incredibly competitive environment. I didn't have friends amongst my colleagues. I was only ever on a 13-week contract at Radio 1. You never knew who was going to get your show or stab you in the back or whatever. So I just tried to be very, very professional. And I was astonished. I just thought, actually, Jimmy Savile wasn't very good. I thought he was weird. When I met him, I thought he was odd. And I thought he was a crap broadcaster.
Yes, that's how we should remember him. What a legacy. Very finally, when you watch Saturday Night TV now, is it a compliment that we see so many of your brilliant ideas from House Party, which was my favourite TV show of all time, being recreated by the likes of Ant and Dec? There's a backhanded compliment in there somewhere, isn't there?
Oh, I'm a big fan of Ant and Dec. A very big fan of Ant and Dec. I think they're excellent presenters. And they've been very honest. You know, they plundered the House Party archive and created Takeaway. So no, I don't have a problem about that. I take it as a compliment. Yeah. You mentioned 400 radio stations.
Yeah, we're going to get to that. That's the final thing. Don't you worry. Positivelyhappy.com is the place to go. Before we get to that, I want to do a bit of sycophantic stuff, because I wonder whether you consider your legacy now and the fact that you've brought so much joy, especially to people of my generation who just have watched you our entire lives. You must be in a happy place with that.
When I look back at some of the things I used to do with the BBC and what I currently do with Channel 4, when I review all those things, yeah, I'm pretty comfortable. I'm pretty comfortable with the space that I've occupied. And I have been very fortunate to have a succession of jobs which almost look as if I planned a career. And,
I don't like the word comfortable. That sounds very safe. I mean, what you did was amazing and brilliantly entertaining. Do you view it as that, or was it a job?
I regard it as the past, to be honest, Alex. It's interesting, the number of approaches I get to take part in retrospective shows,
yes,
nostalgic events and whatever, and I'm too busy with today, and I'm too busy sorting out what I'm going to do tomorrow.
Right.
I was very, very fortunate in having a great career up until this point in July 2015, and things are rocking. Things are really rocking.
They are going from strength to strength. Of course, your biggest TV project currently is Deal or No Deal. No sign of you ever leaving that. You seem to love it as much today as you did on your first show.
Well, Alex, that's a really interesting point, and it allows me to say that at this moment in time, I have no idea about its future.
Oh.
And I don't know if Channel 4 are going to continue with it. We've recorded enough shows to get us to, I think, about March of next year. But as of now, they haven't indicated whether they want any more. It's their call, and I'm very relaxed about it. I had great 10 years, and if they want any more, they've got my phone number.
And you'd love to do it if they want you?
Yeah, I love doing it. You know, it's an absolutely fantastic show to do, because actually, you know, it's me. I just wander in and chat to people and change their lives forever. It's kind of a bit of a buzz.
What I love about you is you make it look effortless. You're never flawed. Nothing can ever happen that can go wrong, because if it goes wrong, you make it go wrong.
See the bits they cut out.
You make it look so easy, and that, of course, is the joy of Noel Edmonds, and the fact that you're positively happy. This is the brand new set of radio stations, really 400 of them. How are we going to find these, and who's going to manage them, and who's going to be on them?
This venture is the biggest thing that I have ever done, and I look around and I think to myself, I wonder why nobody thought of doing it. And the best way to describe it is that 100 years ago, the first magazines appeared dedicated to individual subjects, activities, leisure pursuits, and whatever. And over that century, the magazine shelves gradually got heavier and heavier with all sorts. There was a magazine for everything. Then Sky came along, and they introduced us to the electronic program guide, and we got used to the fact there were multiple channels, and that those channels were actually dedicated to individual subjects. But nobody in radio has ever produced genre-specific radio stations. And that's what I launched last year, very quietly, and is what I've been building. And we have 7 categories. We have radio stations for countries, cities, for interests, for leisure pursuits, for health and well-being, and you can literally build the soundtrack to your lifestyle by dipping in and out of my radio stations. They're all the same in that they have no news, because news is negative and very bad for your health. They have no commercials, and they are totally free. They're all different because each covers a different subject.
And I guess it's infinite. I mean, you could have Chess FM, you could have Computers FM, you can have, obviously, music from 20s, 30s, 40s.
The link is positivity, because, as I say, we don't have, this is ironic, but bearing in mind where I started, but we don't have prattling DJs. We are news-free, commercial-free, and totally free to the consumer. And we have subjects ranging from positively voting, positively, yes, you could do chess if you wanted. I hadn't thought of that. Not very good on the radio, but never mind. But we've got one of our most successful stations, in all seriousness, now listened to in over 80 countries at any one time. In the UK, 20 million people are suffering from insomnia. And Positively Sleepy plays binaural tones, which is part of brain entrainment. And honestly, you listen for 5 minutes and you're off to sleep. It is brilliant. We've got another one that energizes you, Positively Vibe. We launched Positively Royal recently. I managed to get Radio 4, the voice of Radio 4, Brian Perkins, out of retirement, and he's the host on the station. So positivity is the theme, the thread. They're all called Positively something. And yet every single one is genre-specific, supported by social media.
Noel, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. You're such a legend.
Thank you, Alex.
And you deserve every success. Positivelyhappy.com is a place to go and hear just great music. It's really uplifting. And as you say, there's no nonsense in between. You just get on with it. Noel Edmonds' new book is going to be out later in the year. And hopefully we'll see you for a new series next year with Deal or No Deal. And of course, the series continues on Channel 4. Thanks so much for your time.
Alex, thank you very much for your time.